like I said, in the rose course, I do dissect the rose and get into the placement of how you're going to put all those rose petals. And definitely there is a video on my YouTube free for you guys that aren't signed up yet. Definitely my, what I call my dolphin nose rose. And that's just because if you sit this sideways, hopefully you guys can see the little bit of the nose that I add to the comma stroke. It almost looks like the top of, you know, the head of a dolphin nose. So that's what I kind of call that. And again, push yourself with this dolphin nose rose. Make them really, really big. Push them a little bit smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And the more you play with that, you'll start to see that those petals from that outside skirt need to be the biggest. And then you're slowly going to make them smaller and smaller. Right? Once you understand the science of layering that many petals together, then, because a lot of the biggest strokes, things that people don't get right away, is the sizes. Right? So you're slowly going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, but you're not changing brushes, guys. Okay? You're definitely going to still use that same brush and push your pressure less. Okay, so I'm just painting with engine red and white. Just some basic colors just to kind of show you and remind you. And then also the gradient is really important as well. Right, so when you don't have enough dark up there, you don't have the depth behind it. So really you only need that little bit of white and then a blended amount and then dark. Right, so trying to blend your brushes and keeping your gradient true. I did hear that these foam plates are definitely going to be discontinued. And you'll see Donna now even more so, she's been using her double loader. Okay, so if you need to have a little bit more focus to keep you guided or picking up your colors separate, these do work for beginners, but you'll see that eventually the more you play you won't even need this really, and if you use it, it's because you don't want to use foam. And I might just start using this a little bit more just because these might not be available for us anymore, or we'll have to find another substitute. We can't use paper plates in here because it just sucks up all the water out of the paint and then our paint gets super thick. Right, so definitely we got to start with you know, a damp brush is always good, right? Just dampen it once. And then some people are just not wiping out all that water enough, right? So you want it to be damp, but not soaking wet that you see anything on your hands if you tested it on your hands. Okay, so it's just enough to get some moisture in there. And then I find that a lot of people get in trouble with floating medium. As soon as they start adding too much medium, your little blending pile gets too murky and too wet, and then you can't get it dried up again. So you almost have to start another new little spot on your plate because you've maybe put too much floating medium in, right? And then that ends up over blending the colors. So I kind of use floating medium as needed. That's the way I see it, right? Try and see what you can do with paint only. If it's fresh paint just out of the bottle, hasn't been sitting there long, right? And keeping yourself focused to straight across, straight across, straight across, right? Try to keep your wrist maybe grounded a little bit more. And I find that I have to go side to side. My arm, like I have wrist issues and hand issues too, and sometimes I'm not as accurate if I'm trying to blend up and down, especially with bigger brushes, right? So this is one of my little things that I like to do is keep myself sideways, or if I need to go into side load into the puddle to get some fresh white. You see Donna doing that a lot. Keep grabbing dark, because what's happening is we keep grabbing light, we keep grabbing white, and we're not grabbing enough dark to keep that gradient up. So that's one of the biggest things of muddy colors, right? Because you keep adding the white. You think you need to add the white, you add the white, and as soon as you go off kilter, oops, I made a little, off the gradient pile, now you've lost the dark color of the engine red. right? So if you keep putting more dark, right, wipe out your brush if you need to. It's getting too globby because I haven't done anything with it. I'm still trying to figure out how to get my gradient. So now I got way too much paint in my brush, right? I got to fix this. Keep adding dark, right? So see how I've got my dark back again? So that's a big thing too, is understanding that both colors are really needed, right? Not only the light, right? And trying to keep yourself grounded, like I just going up and down to fix things because I've got lots of years of experience of playing. Donna can paint probably upside down in her sleep, right? But in the beginning, we're not used to it. So definitely keeping yourself where it's easy for your wrist to go back and forth and not have to worry about stretching over your plate to try to keep your gradient the colors you want. Does that kind of help, hopefully, for the gradient muddy part? Right? And then coming back over to practice again, test your gradient, test your colors, make sure you're happy, right? Play with them. Yeah, sometimes you get those little wiggly lines there that are streaky. Go over it again and smooth it out. It's not a problem. Right? Playing with all those little wiggles. Some are going to be fast. I call them different dances just to have fun with them, right? Some of them are going to be really big and bumpy, right? All your different wiggles, I call them. I've got like 6 of them, and then if you do them in a shell stroke or whether you do them in a teardrop, it's going to make all kinds more variations for you. So some of the tricks that I teach you guys too, you might never seen Donna do, because some of them I've adapted from the nail industry. I'm a retired nail tech, right? So we used to play with down, up, down, up, down, up. The more you play with those variations of wiggles, you're definitely going to get yourself a little bit more comfortable with variations. Right? Because a lot of the pedals now don't even make sense because they're random combinations of all of them, right? But the biggest thing is the bumping it over. You're not drawing it over, you're bumping it over, right? So you're putting pressure and guiding the brush, right? So a lot of us are comfortable with pencils and you end up not putting enough pressure. Right, so those comma strokes, right? The more you put pressure, the bigger they're going to be. Dragging that brush down a little bit longer, right? When they're bigger. When you're making them smaller, you're not dragging down so far. Right? Some of them have a real wide one there. That's not really right, but sometimes we may do that to put a tail on things. Right? So I don't want you guys to get all caught up going, oh, it doesn't look like hers, because again, we're going to play and change these with pressure and make them bigger, make them smaller, but definitely learning how to make them smaller and smaller and smaller as you can, right? Play with all those variations, right? Don't drag as far down when you're making them that tiny. And so again, with that dolphin nose rose, like if you think of your circle that you want to make, right, with your rose. I got less desk room than I used to have too, so I got to get used to painting on the right side here, move myself over a bit. And that's a big thing too, right? Or if you're not comfortable, you're not going to do a good job. Right? Get in the middle of the camera for you. Right, pressure, pressure, pressure. Again, making sure that you're over half the way. Because if you're only doing a little bit of pressure, you don't need your brush full all to the end. But if you were doing a lot of pressure, then you really need your brush full. But you don't want to go and sandwich all that paint up into your ferrule. Okay, so really you're going to learn all the different variations and how much do I have to load that brush. Well, just keep in mind the pressure that you're going to do for the stroke is how much you're going to need for your brush to be loaded. Right? So if you're doing just little chisel strokes, we ran out of paint on the chisel, but we still have loads of paint up on high. We don't need it. So what we need to do is just adjust your brush more often and picking up those little fresh paints to do those chisels more often, because we need the paint only on the chisel part. Right? I'm just playing around with pressure and illusion of where the paint needs to be in your brush. Right? I like to get into the science of things. Right? So that's a big part of it, is making sure your brush is loaded properly. And then again, if you want to start having that little bit of a tail, right, before you push for that comma, right, then you can start adding wiggles in it, right, making variations of it. This is where you really advance when you're doing backflips and lots of curls, right? So that's really what's going to help you evolve and get into those peonies and really advanced flowers, is the more comfortable you're with that stroke. So again, we're going to do the biggest one we can do. Right? Try to put as much pressure as possible, and you're going to come in front of it, the tail, or behind the tail. Doesn't really matter. But definitely if you want to start off with simple, just do a simple dolphin nose. Right? If you're feeling a little bit more comfortable, definitely start putting a little wiggle in every one of them. Right? You're going to push yourself slowly. Make sure you're comfortable with a smooth one, and then as big as you can make it. So I'm not really doing a proper one here for you here like I did before, but again, hopefully you're getting the gist of what I'm trying to say, right? With pressure and size proportions. Then you're going to brick layer them, and this time you're going to just back off on that pressure just a little bit. So you're starting to make them a little bit smaller. Right? And again, you can do it in different directions. Practice both directions. Right? We don't need to keep this for anything nice. We're just practicing and playing. Right? So you don't have to do those dolphin noses all in one way. Or if you want, you can, and then practice another rose all with the left-handed way. Split it up. You know, play, have fun, make variations of it. Don't take it so seriously. And then again, as you're getting smaller, you gotta make sure you're keeping space. Right? I don't have a good coverage there. I'm gonna go over it again. But I'm not taking my strokes too seriously. Like I said, I'm really trying to learn proportion and trying to get myself a little smaller. Pick only one element at a time to critique yourself at. Right? Don't worry about streaks and anything like that. What do you focus on right now? Pressure, size, proportion. Then we're going to get a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller, right? You're going to go all the way around in circles until you can't get any smaller, right? You ran out of room. And then usually what I do in the middle is I'll just make it all dark, and then you can always make just little tiny little marks just to finish it in the middle. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. Like I said, if you see that video on my YouTube, you'll definitely get this one. I'm sure I put it on there. And it's also into the program as well, right? It's in all my boot camps. I'm trying to get you guys to think outside the box when you're practicing. Oop, that wasn't very good. Get up on my chisel, flatten that brush out a little bit more. Too gloppy. Right? I always have to question myself, why am I not getting the stroke the way I like? Well, look at the brush. Right? Keep practicing, you know, especially those little small ones. little tiny wiggle. That kind of help remind you guys again. You guys playing? Definitely, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. That was my big aha moment, for sure, realizing that every layer of that petal of the rose, especially when we're trying to do like the traditional cabbage rose, right, you have to expect that you're going to have that center in there. And definitely, like you said, practicing those centers will tell you how much space that you need for your rose, right? If you want to put an easy bud, right, you got the area in your mind, how big that brush gave you, right? So again, you want to have petals that are going to be a little bit, you know, how many rows do you want to do, right? So you're seeing how far, how many rows of, you know, that you can make that flower around that petal. Right, so we got that center area. So we got to build our petals bigger and a lot of pressure. And then you don't have to make as many, right? So you're making them bigger, wider. And just doing some random wiggles. A little bit smoother ones or a little bit more elegant, right? And you can do 6 or 5. You know, it really doesn't matter how big the petals are, but you'll try to get them a little bit, you know, the same. Sometimes I will make my lower petals a little bit bigger, right? If you need to come a little bit wider, you can always go over it. I ran out of room, I didn't have enough for 6. Then I'm gonna try and make these a little bigger, right? And then I'm gonna come in and have another row, right? So my gradient is up high enough so I can see dark behind my petal. So you see how the petals are a little bit smaller now, right? So ease up on that pressure on the second row. Leaving nice airy space in between, not to go so close to each other, right? That's what I see a lot, is that they're not leaving enough room, and then you're doing the next one, you know, right behind it, and then all of a sudden you've lost your first layer, right? Again, a little bit streaky. Yeah, I noticed it right away. I started right over on my stroke. Alright, so you can do 2 layers of full petals if you like. Alright, we can make the top one into a center. Pressure, bring, and then you have to bump that brush down, not just guide it under like a U. You gotta bump it, right? Both sides gotta move so then they get some length to it. You see that? How I'm pressing down on that brush? Right, so I gotta make that look a little neater now. Right, we can just do it a U, easy little U. So one thing I did do was see how my connection, right? So it's not just a flat U. I gave it a tail down on both sides. Right? So then that way I can grab that tail and then slide it right in front of my bud. Right? So it's easier to grab the tails. That's the hard part, is that little small one. So what is that? And then I just brought my tail more in front. then down. That's the difference between that stroke, is curling it under. Right. So again, we can put a couple different petals down underneath. Fill up that space. I kind of went a little crooked here. That's okay, because no rose is ever perfect. Alright, so again, I'm just filling up some space here with another row. And do I have enough room over here? No. So what I'm going to do is bring in another comma stroke. Right? And then again, these little side ones are slider dolphin noses. So you're just bringing them out a little bit wider and sideways. Right? So I can sneak in one more of those. Right? I can come over underneath this petal here, put pressure, and then pull in another one underneath. I have a tiny little bit of space here that the paper shows. I'm not going to worry about that too much. I'm just going to add a little bit more paint in there and cheat. Right, so again, you just keep playing with them. No two roses are ever going to be the same. But the biggest trick is those last 3 strokes. If you want to minimize it to 3 of those, you know, then you're going to do more skirts. Right, doing that dolphin nose sideways in both directions, and then sometimes we pick up on our chisel, put another pressure, slide it again, so I made 2 dolphin noses in 1 stroke. Right, so really I could have curled that in and did a little bit more wiggles. Right, so that's when it starts to get interesting, is when you start putting those little extra bumps and things. Right, I can grab the tail of this and drop it again and add another little layer into my rose blood, curling it around. Maybe just a little tiny closer if you have the room, but again, you have to get smaller, right, as we get into that closer area. So sometimes it's just a very, very, very tiny little tick that we need to add in there just to close something. All right, so I'll try to give you food for thought on how to design it and get your proportions kind of mapped out. So yeah, you guys can hold up your work. I can probably see a little bit here. If you have any questions, definitely send me pictures too. I can also help you privately if you want. Yeah, so you could have went a little bit higher on your scoop if you wanted to. The top one that goes in front of the rosebud. Right. Let's see if I can do this quick. Right, so you're not having enough length down here. Gotta really push that bottom one longer. And then when you cut, you can cut up a little bit higher. You see that? And then you still have all this length under here. So if we're not making our U long enough, we're not putting enough pressure on the bottom to make it lower, right? You're not drawing it lower. You gotta get that pressure down to make it longer, and then you'll have more room to cut in. That make sense? Because that was the big thing that I didn't get for a long time, was when I was doing those U-strokes. Because a lot of us, we tend to just make it, you know, a U-stroke. That's still a perfect U-stroke, but adding that little bit of extra bump, right? Like, I'm trying to do it slowly so you guys can see, and I'm trying not to do it any wider or bigger. I'm trying to still do it the same width, but hopefully you guys can see that the pressure is going to bring it down lower and longer for you, so you'll have a nicer bud. Top, you can get away with not having that because you're going to cover most of it anyways. But even that, like, a lot of people are doing their top bud and they're drawing it over, right? So if you have a little bit more pressure, you'll have more space to open it up too. If you wanted to have a more open bud, because that makes a big difference too. Or if you close it very tight, you're gonna have like more of an oval, right? And then if you come really low and up and around, then it'll look like more open. Right, so there's lots of different variations for sure of that rosebud. But definitely all those little strokes are based off of these 10 basic strokes, which is in my very first course. Is understanding all these and then playing around with a little extra circle there, just to get you going. Because I know you guys all love the circle too. But it does come back. It does come back and visit you again in different flowers. So there is a reason why I got you guys started to play with it. So yeah, again, just playing around with simple roses. They don't have to be crazy. Like, this is a very simple little rose. Just those 3 couple closes and your petals, right? And sometimes we just try to get too crazy, and then they end up too complicated. You're not ready for that many layers. Definitely just try to keep them simple, and they're gonna look very nice for you. Again, playing around with that liner brush. Again, same concept. Really big ones on the outside, slowly getting smaller and smaller and smaller till you get in. The more you play around with that building of big, medium, small, even with the liner brush, then when you go back and do that full rose again, you'll start to see who's that? You'll start to see how it'll start looking better if you build it in proportionally. Even if you do it even this tiny, okay? This is from my tiny painting course. I get you guys doing it all with a size 6 and a 2. You know, again, the outer skirt has to be the biggest, and then you're slowly building it in smaller and smaller. If you wanted to do like little jewelry boxes or keychains or, you know, stuff like that, then definitely it's not just all about doing nails. I'm retired now. I don't even do my own anymore, so my hands look terrible. But they're always covered in paint, and now they're broken because of work. So yeah, I still love getting the tiny brushes out sometimes. I do have that flower, the European flower shop there with the wagon that has some tiny painting in it too, if you guys want another project to keep playing with smaller brushes. That was a fun one too. Get you pushed. So how you doing there, Miss Margaret? You're the newest lady there that I haven't spent much time here with. So yeah,
pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, great. Awesome. Yeah, for sure. I can see how they got smaller and smaller and smaller. Perfect. Yeah, great. Yeah, you wrapped it right around. Yeah, very pretty. So yeah, definitely if you guys are interested, the ones that I think all of you are, except for Miss Margaret now. I do have a special for 30% off my full program if you're interested in signing up on my 14 course, package deal, and then also become a VIP and join us in the group. So yeah, definitely, I'm here last Tuesday of every month for a free Zoom. Anytime you guys want to pick my brain, come join me every month. And then definitely send me pictures of your practice if you have any questions. And I hope you guys...
It was a nice refresher course. Thank you on the road.
Good. Well, like I usually try to keep it open. Like somebody asked me, what are we learning tonight? And I'm like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Right? You guys help me figure it out. Right? Like once I get to see who shows up, and then what do you want to see? Because maybe somebody asked me a question and they didn't even show up. But no, yeah, definitely. I want to get a hold of you guys and answer questions for you. I usually leave it fairly open. We usually stick to basic strokes. Again, depending on how many new people we have on the Zoom, sometimes I wouldn't get into the rows, but because we had so many VIPs here tonight, definitely I'm always open to showing you guys whatever you're struggling with, right? But the rows is definitely about proportions. That's the biggest thing.
I always forget about that one, and I like that one because it's easy to do, and I forget about that one, that you just open up and off and nose it around.
Yeah, it's really fun and easy, and it's a great exercise to practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy if you can do the dolphin nose.
Yeah, practice a bunch on the side, just straight across. Don't do it in a circle. Just do, a bunch of, most pressure you can do. Just do a bunch of rows of big ones, then ease up on your pressure on the next row, and ease up on your pressure on the next row. You know what I mean? And just keep practicing your pressure differences. And then once you get the connection of the pressure differences, then you can start playing around in a circle with the rows.
And then you have to have the chisel.
Yeah, so hopefully you're happy with your brushes for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a good chisel.
Yep.
On my brush, it's pretty much brand new, but I think I'm using the wrong pressure on the paper because almost every stroke I lose my gradient. The red takes over almost every stroke.
Are you pushing maybe too much on the back side? You got to come up a little bit more straight up and down. Because even when you're blending your brush on the plate, right, if you go and rock your hand back so you're under-directed, oops, sorry, that's my face, you don't want to see that. Your angle is really important, and this is what happens. Sometimes I play around with my pressure and angle if I want to change the gradient. So if you always push on that back side, you're going to push the dark right up. So you got to straighten out your brush a little bit more so that you're not shoving the dark up. So even when you do the stroke, if you're on the back side of pushing it, then you're going to push the dark up into the light. So you got to make sure that you're doing the stroke straight up and down so you're even. Does that make sense? Like where you're directed? If I wanted more white in my blending pile, I would actually push on my brush on this side. And look, I'm pushing all the white down now. So if I did a stroke, I would have a lot less dark. Alright, I'm pushing that white all the way down. Now I got a quarter dark and 3/4 light by pushing over onto the front side when I push. So when we're doing these strokes, we got to be aware of that too. How is your hand positioned? Are you a little bit too heavy on this corner? Then yes, you will be pushing all that dark up. Does that make sense, Penny?
Yeah.
So try to be a little bit more up and down. Once you get your gradient perfect on your plate, be consistent. If you want, try to be consistent. And then as soon as you notice too much dark coming up, then you got to put it over direct a little bit to shove some of that white back down again. And then that way, once you learn how to control this gradient, you'll be able to push it up and down, and like after a while playing too much, you're gonna end up getting muddy. If I was playing that much, sometimes I'd have two separate piles. I'd have one that has a very low gradient, and then I'd have one that has a very high gradient, and every time I grab paint, then that way I can stay in my little pile that I'm looking for, because maybe there is some particular reason why I want more white and very, very little bit of dark. Right? Mostly when we're going upside down doing the stroke, then we want just a little bit of dark on the top. Right?
Okay, it's when I actually do the stroke, I must be tilting.
You must be tilting back the same way. Yeah, it's the same way. Even with your stroke work, if you're always like over directed under towards yourself, you're gonna end up shoving that dark up. So try to get up a little bit more up on your chisel straight and pressure. And then you should stay true to the same gradient that you picked up. Maybe you're picking up too much dark when you go to do the stroke. That's why it's got lots of dark. You know what I mean?
It starts out white, and then by the time I get to the tail, it's almost all red.
Oh, well, again, I'm straight up and down. I use my pinky a lot to keep me grounded, so that I'm straight up and down.
I think the standing up straight helped.
Yep, yeah. I had a feeling it was just being... as soon as we change that angle, we will change even how we load our brush. And if you're...
I want my paper to be out here because I don't want to wear my reading glasses. I'm going to have to pull it closer to me and put my reading glasses on.
Yeah, for sure. I need glasses now. Yeah, no.
I have bifocals, but I can't see through if we're up closer. So I have to put on reading glasses.
Yeah, you'll have to get some working glasses.
Yeah, I have like 10 pairs in my house and my shop. So.
Well, see, this is just it. We don't know what our struggles are until we start playing, right? And that's why I love meeting with you guys, because then I can catch you while you're still got the paint in your brush, and then you can adjust whatever might be the problem. That's why I love meeting you guys. So even with your VIP program, you struggling anytime, we meet one-on-one privately. All right, I've got hours and hours and hours and hours of videos that you guys can follow along, but definitely I'm always here for you guys along the way as well. All right, one way or another, you send me questions and I make it my next hot topic. And then you guys all learn from each other this way too, right? Maybe there was a question you never even thought of and you didn't know that you were doing it too until somebody else brought it up. So that's what I really love about the group meetings, is that you guys will help each other. Alright guys, so yeah, keep practicing those roses and all your different strokes. And got you a little extra before you got ready for the rose. That's okay, Penny, I know, because you've already been playing with them. But yeah, go ahead and check out the videos, play with them, do them all. That's what I always suggest, not just your favorite ones, because the ones that you find struggling you is the ones you're going to learn the most out of. Right, so don't be afraid to try something that you feel is intimidating or you're not interested in, because there's a lot of things that I was like, I'll never do this. But practicing it and playing with it and get my head out of that box, and then when I got back to my favorite stuff, I always did better. I always did better.
Is there something else that you would suggest that utilizes this kind of stroke besides the rose? To get my mind away from I need to do a rose.
Did you see that one video I made where the connection of teardrop? When you do a teardrop, half of your teardrop is a comma.
And I'm pretty confident with the teardrops. I have one right there.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident with those, but when I try to break it in half and do two comma strokes, it doesn't work.
So right on top of your teardrop, try to go and do your comma on half of it. Then do the other half. So first you're building your teardrop, and then you're going to use that teardrop to keep you guided. To cut it in half, and then make that same shape. It might look like a little bit of a heart, but that's okay. But you know what I mean? It's just catching the drift that it's the last half of that teardrop is your comma. When you're doing your shell strokes, that last stroke down, this right here, is a comma. Did you see that video? I know I really played around a lot with that one. The identification of the comma. It's a great one. Like I said, I can't play enough. Even practicing those shell strokes backwards. Again, your very last one is your comma.
And which video is that?
Oh, it's one.
Comma strokes?
Yeah, it's one of the most current ones I did. I believe it's a free one on YouTube. But I might have.
I think I've watched it a few times.
I tagged it into the program as well, so, as an extra.
Yeah, I think it's in the FAQs or
something. Yeah, I did make sure that I tagged the really good ones in there. Also into your program so that you guys don't miss it that are new coming in. And yeah, no, I'm always here to remind you. That was the biggest aha moment for me, is when you're doing these, just remember that still your comma. And maybe you're not closing that shell stroke enough. Maybe that's why you never caught the connection of that very last closer, right? You're not bringing that down enough. You're doing straight across and then stopping maybe, just at the top. You're not bringing it down enough.
Yeah, when I'm thinking about it as a closing stroke, or like in the teardrop stroke, it doesn't stop me from doing it properly.
Yeah.
But when I try to break it down into a right comma and left comma, it's all in my head. I don't know.
It'll come. Yeah. Just keep playing. And then now you're going to be getting into the shell strokes more. So the more you keep playing with those shell strokes and the daisy strokes, again, the daisy strokes too are the big connection there is when you're doing a daisy stroke, you should see that color come right through the middle. Sometimes we end up doing a lazy daisy. What's a lazy daisy end up? To be a comma, because you got a little bit of side movement going on when you're trying to make that daisy. You'll see the color ride down one side or the other. But a true daisy, you should be straight up on your chisel. That brush should come straight through the middle so that you have the white following right through the middle. And then when you start playing with those daisies that aren't proper, you'll see the lazy daisy on you. Then you start to get that connection again. Even though you're not doing a proper daisy, you still start, oh yeah, that's a comma. Right? Because you've got the color following on the one side. And that's the whole trick of the comma, is the white has to come along the side or the other side. And then we tuck them into the rows. Then you're seeing that edge off to the side instead of right through the middle like our daisies are. So yeah, keep playing. You're doing great. You're doing great, Penny. Alright guys, I know some of you are dropping off. That's okay, that's what happens. You guys sometimes come for quicker visits, and your hubby there. You have a question? I'm sorry, Margaret?
I said, thank you. I enjoyed this a lot.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, definitely join us again and message me, okay? If you have any question, you want to join us. Like I said, to be a part of our VIPs, I'll give you 30% off to get you signed up to my full program.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So you guys have a great night.
Bye.
And we'll see you soon. I'll be live soon on my page, I'm sure, soon. All right, guys. Big hugs.